Hey guys, it's Lego with Lego Vids. Today we're going to be going over the Witch Doctor and all these skills and abilities that are available to the Witch Doctor class in the Diablo 3 beta. This is during patch 14. Blizzard has mentioned that patch 14 is the patch that they plan to ship with the game when the game releases, and so this should actually be a really close accurate view of what will be available in the game when the game actually releases. Now, there could be some tweaks here and there. Blizzard is still tweaking things, but this will give you a good overview of what different skills and abilities are available to the Witch Doctor class when the game releases, and currently what's available in the beta for patch 14. To start off, Witch Doctors work off a resource called mana. Mine currently has 270. This increases as you level up. You can also get some items and things like that that'll increase your mana. I've broken the Witch Doctor skills and abilities into 3 categories. And these are kind of categories I just kind of created on my own. They're not like the Blizzard sanctioned categories. But the first category I have are Spammable DPS abilities. And these are abilities that you could spam all day long and never run out of mana. The next, I just call them normal DPS abilities. So they're the normal DPS ones that you can use them, but if you use them a lot, you'll eventually run out of mana, and then you can just switch back to your spammable ones. So that'll kind of be the mechanic that I anticipate a Witch Doctor will have. You know, when they need a lot of damage, they'll use their normal DPS ones, and then if they run out of mana or they just need some light damage, they'll use their spammable DPS abilities. So they'll kind of have like those 2 types. Next up, the next category I just call summons. After that we have, or summons being like the different creatures and things that you can summon up. Next we have utility, so the different kind of crowd controls and things like that would fall under utility. And then finally we have passive, which are just the passive abilities that you can select. So you'll be able to select you'll be able to select 6 main abilities, and then you can have 3 passives. So right now in the beta we can unlock up to 4 abilities. So let's go ahead and get started. First ability we have is Poison Dart. Costs just 6 mana, which is really cheap because you actually regenerate your mana faster than that, and this is one that stands in the spammable DPS category. And so you learn this at level 1. You shoot it, it deals 100% weapon damage as poison and an additional 50% weapon damage as poison over 2 seconds. And so you'll hit it and it'll leave a dot that'll actually tick for 2 seconds. So let's take a look at it. The animation is just a dart. We'll zoom out here, and this will travel for full distance until it actually hits something. So good for long range. Let's go ahead and check this out in combat. Next up we have the runed version of Poison Dart, the first rune that is available. You get this rune at level 6. It's called Splinters, and it changes the way that Poison Dart works. Instead of shooting 1 dart, it will actually shoot 3 poison darts that deal 60% weapon damage as poison each. And so actually increases the DPS of this ability. It will do 180% overall if all 3 darts hit the same target. So ends up being a pretty strong ability. Let's check it out in combat. Next up we have another rune for Poison Dart. It's called Numbing Dart. You learn this at level 13. And it's going to add the effect of Poison Dart. Toxins in the Poison Dart reduce the target's movement speed by 60% for 2 seconds. So it's going to be that same duration as the poison over time that the Poison Dart normally does, and so it'll be good for kiting around big guys if you need to. So let's go ahead and check this out in combat. Next up we move on to another spammable DPS ability, and this is the last one that we have in this category for now, and it's called Haunt. You learn this at level 11. just costs 9 mana, which is really cheap, and your mana is actually going to regenerate faster than that, so you could spam this all day long. This isn't a very good spammable, I guess, DPS ability, but you could use it all day and you would never run out of mana, so it's in this spammable DPS category. Haunt an enemy with a spirit dealing 360% weapon damage as arcane over 15 seconds. If the target dies, the spirit will haunt another nearby enemy. So it's basically a dot that lasts for a long time and does a pretty decent amount of damage. So if you have something that's going to live for a while, or you have like a big group of enemies and you just kind of need to whittle them down, you can use haunt on them. And so you can haunt multiple targets too, and then that would kind of give you that extra AoE effect to it. So you could throw that out at multiple targets. So there you go. Once it's actually on the target, it kind of swirls on the target, so you could be able to tell who it's on. Let's check it out in combat. Okay, next up we're going to move into our normal DPS category. I have 5 abilities actually in this category. The first one up is Grasp of the Dead. It costs 75 mana, cooldown of 8 seconds. Ghoulish hands reach out from the ground, slowing enemy movement speed by 60% and dealing 20% weapon damage as physical over 8 seconds. So this is actually a cool ability, and since the damage is so low, I almost put it into the utility section, but I do actually think the DPS is enough to kind of consider it an AoE DPS ability, and I think that's the actual best purpose of this ability. So this is Grasp of the Dead. I do like the hand effect. Grasp of the Dead actually has a rune effect to it as well, and I'll be able to show that off, and that's called Groping Eels. You learn Grasp of the Dead at level 2, you get the Groping Eels rune effect at level 7, and Groping Eels is actually going to just increase the damage of Grasp of the Dead. Now this particular rune does have a unique effect to it though that is not reflected in just the base Grasp of the Dead, and that's the percentage amount of damage. Groping Eels increases the damage done by 39% weapon damage as physical, so it's still physical, but it increases the damage to 39%. Now that 39% is actually based on your weapon's speed, which helps balance the ability out no matter what type of weapon you use. So if you use a fast weapon, the percentage is increased because a fast weapon would have low weapon damage, but it could still be near the same DPS. For example, I have this 15 DPS dagger, but the damage is 6 to 14, whereas if I have this particular two-handed sword, you know, it's 17.6 DPS, but the damage range is 13 to 19, so the damage is higher. And so because of that, if I use this as actually a slower weapon, just a 1.1 attack speed versus the 1.5 dagger I'm using now, it will change the 39% on Groping Eels down to 29%, but the damage is still going to be roughly about the same because that percentage is going to vary based on your weapon's speed. So just keep that in mind if you're actually checking this out later on. You're like, I swear it was this other percentage. It's probably because you put on a different speed weapon. So here is the actual graphic on Groping Eels. Now let's check this out in combat. Next up we have an ability called Corpse Spiders. This is another normal DPS ability, but you can kind of consider it a summon. It costs 48 mana. You learn this at level 3. Throw a jar of 4 spiders that attack nearby enemies for 25% weapon damage as physical before dying. This is a really good single target attack. It doesn't work very well for AoE, but for single targets it's probably one of your best spells. 25% may not seem like much, but since it has 4 spiders, it's going to add up to 100%, and the spiders can attack more than once. And so you can actually get some pretty good DPS out of this spell. So let's go ahead and check it out. Now let's see what this does in combat.
I do not have enough mana.
Next up, we have a rune for corpse spiders called Leaping Spiders. You'll learn this rune at level 9, and it's going to change the spiders. It'll summon jumping spiders that leap up to 25 yards to reach their target and attack for 30% weapon damage as physical. So the damage goes up a little bit, and these spiders can actually jump a pretty good distance, 25 yards. I actually like these a lot more than the previous spiders because they can jump and they actually kind of look cool too. Let's go ahead and check these out in combat. Next ability that we have on the list is called Plague of Toads. Only costs 21 mana. You can't spam it forever at this low level. Later on, once you get some more mana regen, you might be able to, but you can spam this ability for a while. So it's kind of midway between spammable and normal. At this level, I will actually eventually run out of mana, but I can spam it for a while. So just 21 mana. Release a handful of toads that deal 130% weapon damage as poison to enemies they come in contact with. You learn Plague of Toads at level 5, so let's take a look. This is just one cast. It throws out 3 toads and they kind of bounce around at random. These are not very good for single target because it's hard to get them to hit what you want. But if there are a lot of enemies that you need to hit, these work pretty good because you can just flood the screen with them. As you can tell, I can spam this for quite a while even with my low level here. So let's go ahead and check this out in combat. Next up, we have a cool rune ability for Plague of Toads, and it's called Explosive Toads. You will learn this at level 11. Mutate to fire bullfrogs that explode for 169% weapon damage as fire. So it's basically just a DPS increase, and it changes the damage from being poison to fire. I actually really like the way these look. It's still just 3 toads at a time, and the mana cost isn't any different, so you can still spam for quite a while. I do like the way these look though. Let's go ahead and check these out in combat. Next up, we have the ability called Fire Bats. You learn this at level 12. Costs just 27 mana, but it's a channeled ability, so it'll continue to cost that over time. Call forth a swarm of fiery bats to burn enemies in front of you for 100% weapon damage as fire. So I do like this ability. It is a pretty good AoE ability. As you can see on this graphic, the bats kind of come in from behind you and you light them on fire. So I do think it's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and check this out in combat. Next up, we have the first of our summons abilities, and this is going to be called Summon Zombie Dogs. You learn this at level 4, costs just 30 mana, a 1-minute cooldown. Summon 3 zombie dogs from the depths to fight by your side. Each dog deals 9% of your weapon damage as physical per hit. That does seem kind of small, and it's supposed to be. The zombie dogs are not designed to do all of your damage for you, but they do act as really good tanks, and they kind of keep the enemies off your back while you can pelt them from range, so they do work well for that. Let's go ahead and summon them up. As you can see, when you summon them, they just kind of burrow up from underneath you. These zombie dogs are actually really fast, so they're pretty cool. Let's check them out in combat. Next up, we have a rune ability for summon zombie dogs called Rabid Dogs. You will learn this at level 12. So your summoned zombie dogs gain an infectious bite that deals 9% of your weapon damage as poison over 3 seconds. I want to say that this is in addition to the 9% that they already deal per hit, so it's actually kind of doubling their damage, but it's damage over time. So let's go ahead and summon these up. As you can see, they're green. I do like the way these look. Otherwise, they act kind of the same way as the other zombie dogs. They're fast, and they act as good tanks. So let's go ahead and check these out in combat. Next up, we have an ability called Sacrifice. I guess it can kind of be considered either the summon or normal DPS. It doesn't actually summon anything, but it does require your zombie dogs for you to have at least one zombie dog to use. So the ability you learn at level 13, it does not cost any mana. You banish your zombie dogs, causing them to explode, each dealing 200% of your weapon damage as physical to all enemies within 12 yards. So it's a good AoE ability, and if you're using it in combination with summon zombie dogs, you'd be able to use it once a minute. If you timed it right, you could even use it like twice in quick succession, like if the zombie dogs was already off cooldown. So that would be like a really heavy burst AoE, because each dog is 200%, so that's 600% if they're all close to each other. Let's check this out. Then we could summon them back up and do it one more time if we needed some real heavy AoE. The downside to this is now we don't have any zombie dogs. We have to wait for that minute. But let's go ahead and check and see what this is like in combat. Next, we have the first of our utility abilities, and we're going to learn this at level 8. It's called Hex. Cost is just 30 mana, cooldown of 10 seconds. Summon a fetish shaman for 8 seconds that will hex enemies into chickens. Hexed enemies are unable to perform offensive actions and take 10% additional damage. So this is kind of like a summon, but since it's more defensive, I've kind of put it into the utility category. So let's see what this little shaman looks like. He can actually get off more than one hex while he's out. I'm kind of not sure if I really like this ability. It just seems strange to have a crowd control that typically only works on like one or two enemies when I feel like I'm constantly fighting like this big horde of enemies all at the same time. Maybe there'll be some good use for this later on in the game, or especially in PvP, but in just normal player versus monster combat, I'm not sure I completely see like a real purpose for this. Either way, let's go ahead and see what this looks like in combat. Next ability we have on the list under utility is Horrify. We learned this at level 9. Costs 22 mana, cooldown of 20 seconds. Don a spectral mask that horrifies all enemies within 12 yards, causing them to run in fear for 4 seconds. And so typically they're going to run away from you. So if you get surrounded in by a bunch of guys, you can use this. It'll get them off your back. It's kind of a cool ability. I do like the graphic on it, so let's go ahead and check this out. Alright, let's see it in combat. Finally, guys, we have access to our passive abilities starting at level 10, and those are going to be the last ones that we're going to review in this video. So first up, we have Jungle Fortitude. Again, you gain access to this at level 10. It reduces all damage taken by you and your pets by 20%. So if you find that you're taking a lot of hits or your pets are dying too easy, then this may be a really good ability to be able to go ahead and, or passive rather, to go ahead and sock it. Next up, we have Vermin. You also get this one at level 10, so you have the choice of the two. Your Plague Toads, Corpse Spiders, Locust Swarm, and Fire Bats abilities do 20% more damage. So if you use any of those abilities, or even more than one, this is a really, really great passive to have. I really like to pair this up with the abilities listed here. You know, I've used it with all three of the abilities we have access to: Plague Toads, Corpse Spiders, and Fire Bats, and I think it's a fantastic ability if you're going to use those abilities, and that this passive is almost required. I mean, how do you say no to 20% damage, right? Next, we have Circle of Life. You learn this at level 13. Whenever an enemy dies within 12 yards, there is a 5% chance that a zombie dog will automatically emerge. The range of this effect is increased by items that increase your gold pickup radius. Now, there are some item affixes in the game that increase like the radius that you can actually pick gold up at, because all you have to do is just run near gold and it'll pick it up automatically. And so that's what it's referring to. It's referring to items that actually have that affix on them. Another thing to know about this skill is you don't actually need to have the zombie dog skill at all for this to work. So you can just not have the zombie dog skill, and then you can use Circle of Life and you can still get zombie dogs as they randomly are resurrected for you through this passive ability. So that's kind of cool. The maximum amount of zombie dogs that you can have is 3. So if you are using the summon skill so that you can summon up your own zombie dogs, probably would not use Circle of Life. The exception to that would be if you also wanted to be able to use the sacrifice ability that blows up your zombie dogs. Circle of Life would be a cool way to be able to get your zombie dogs back when your summoned zombie dogs is actually on cooldown. So it kind of gives you that constant, maybe passive ability to gain zombie dogs even when it's on cooldown. Might be able to do some cool things with this, so just wanted to point out some of the intricate pieces about this particular passive. Finally, we have Spiritual Attunement. You also learn this one at level 13. Maximum mana is increased by 20%. Regenerate 1% of your maximum mana per second. Mana is the fuel you use to cast offensive and defensive skills. So extra mana regen is great if you're using spells that are expensive. You know, we talked about some of the spammable DPS ones that you can spam forever. Then we talked about some of the normal DPS ones. Some of them are expensive, like spiders. You know, you can throw those for a little bit, but after about 10 seconds or so, you're going to be out of mana. You're going to have to switch back to spammable ones. So if you really want to use spiders, spiritual attunement may be a great ability to have. Not only will you increase your mana, be able to throw even more spiders out, but you'll be able to throw them for longer because your mana regen is increased as well. So kind of a neat ability to have. I bet with this, if you take some of those cheaper spells like fire bats or plague toads, those are kind of in that medium range between like normal DPS. I can't spam forever, but it's still kind of cheap, so I can spam it for a long time. With something like this, you might be able to spam it forever, especially once you start to get your own regen on your gear and things like that, because you can get mana regen on your gear. So some of those normal DPS ones can't spam forever, can probably be promoted into that spammable DPS category with the right amount of regen. So that's it, guys, as far as the overview for the Witch Doctor, all their different skills and abilities and passives that they have access to in the Diablo 3 beta. Again, this is during patch 14. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, please just post below here. And otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day, and until next time.